Alright, so we're gonna get started here. So good morning and welcome to the Hillsborough Youth Commission's first Fentanyl Awareness Day. My name is Rohan Dalal and I am an 11th grader at Crystal Springs Upland School here in Hillsborough. And I have lived in Hillsborough for 14 years. 2 years ago, I realized that other towns had youth commissions and ours did not. And I thought that we should have an empowered youth voice that could speak to issues that we as teens care about. So I approached the town council, and specifically Councilmember Al Royce, right there, and he met with me and thought it was a great idea to get more youth involved in civics. And more importantly though, he shared with me his fear, fentanyl. And I didn't know much about fentanyl at the time, but in the past year I've learned so much about this public health crisis affecting teens. Teens like all of us gathered here today. Many of us and our parents think it can't happen to us, but it can. It takes one pill, one mistake. There's no room for error. Fentanyl poisoning can result in death. So today, we are here to learn about fentanyl and fentanyl poisoning, how dangerous it is, what the resources in our county are, how to ask for help and call 911, and how to combat the public health crisis with Narcan, something we should all have at home and carry with us. Thank you for taking the time and for the first step of being here and increasing awareness. We need to just say no. K-N-O-W. Knowledge is power. I want to thank the support of the town, especially Councilmember Al Royce, Councilmember Leslie Ragsdale, City Manager Doug Davis, and Staff Liaison Mandy Brown, and all of the commissioners who are here today. If you're on the Youth Commission, can you please stand? I would like to give a huge shout out to Diego Gomez, Griffin Jeffords, Erica Lynn, Kiara Louie, David Rabinovich, Ella Roslansky, and Rod Sharbib. I would also especially like to thank Brody Friedeberg, who organized the donations and our raffle that you saw outside. So please make sure to sign in to win some very cool prizes. Second, Madeline Young, who designed our beautiful program booklet, which is available for today's event. And finally, my sister Anya Dalal, who has organized this entire speaker program for today. These speakers are incredible leaders in our community, and we are so grateful for the volunteering of their time this morning. And with that, I would like to welcome Councilmember Leslie Ragsdale, elected to the Hillsborough Town Council in 2022. She is a graduate of Yale Law School and has dedicated her time over the past 25 years to the betterment of our community as past president of the Hillsborough Schools Foundation and now a member of our town council. She's been instrumental in the launch of our youth commission and has supported our events, especially Fentanyl Awareness Day. Thank you for being here today.
All right. I try not to gush too much, but these kids are amazing. Just a year ago, this Hillsborough Youth Commission was a gleam in the eye of Al Royce and Rohan, and just it's amazing what they've been able to do in a year. They've done many events and mental health survey, and I really do believe that you guys are going to save a life. I don't know how many, but you will save a life. So I'm very, very proud of you. And then I hope that we will share the recording after and send it to the people who registered, because if you guys could share it with your friends, you also save a life. I want to officially welcome, you'll be recognizing all of our esteemed luminaries who are speaking, but Al Royce, fellow council member, our mayor and vice mayor couldn't be here today, but they send, and also Councilwoman Marie Schwang, we're all extremely supportive of you guys. We have two school board members here, Ann Huang Chen and Don Geddes, and thank you so much for all you guys do for our kids in this town. And with that, I will pass it back to Rohan. Thank you. Oh, and also thank you so much to Dr. Kimberly Dalal for raising these two kids. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Ragsdale. One housekeeping item, the restroom is down to the left if you need it. And I'll now turn it over to Anya Dalal, a ninth grader at Castellea, and our Hillsborough Youth Commission Secretary and Fentanyl Awareness Day Program Chair, who has assembled this most impressive panel of local experts in government, public health, education, public safety, medicine, and parent advocacy. Anya.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hillsborough Fentanyl Awareness Day. Thank you all for coming today. We are super grateful, especially to our amazing panel here today. As Rohan said, they are all very important leaders in our community, and they're all passionate about educating people on fentanyl and Narcan. So before our speaker panel, we are going to show a video put together by Song for Charlie, which is an organization dedicated to educating others on fentanyl poisoning. And you can find out more about their organization on the website, which is in our program. Once again, we'd like to thank everyone for being here today, and with the increased knowledge of fentanyl and its potential effects, we hope you all gain more insight into how we can help save lives in our community. So our first speaker is our California Senator Josh Becker. Last August, he hosted a town hall webinar focused on the fentanyl crisis and what's being done on the peninsula. Elected in 2020, he is a champion of enhanced fentanyl awareness and increased access to Narcan. Today, he will speak to us regarding fentanyl in California and the power of Narcan.
Well, I want to thank Rohan and Anya and the Youth Commission for organizing and just want us all to take a moment after that video. It's just really hard. Anyway, that's very hard, but that's why we're all here today, and I want to thank the students because, as Council Member Ragsdale said, I think we will save a life, and we'll hopefully save many lives through increasing awareness. And I know that you'll hear today from more experts, people more equipped than me to talk about the behavioral health implications and the education lessons, what we're doing in our schools across the district, from our superintendent who's here today. You know, I can speak from my own perspective, certainly as a parent of teenagers, and an event that we did, and I want to thank Liz Walker for being here. I know you'll hear from her very, very powerfully. But I think the message of today and having this organized by the Youth Commission is that we need to have this message heard from peers. And even we had Song from Charlie on the webinar. What they said is we can tell our kids that we want them to be safe, and they may listen, but if we tell them you want your friends to be safe, then they will listen to that. And so hopefully this message gets through. And what's important is to recognize that when we hear about the opioid crisis and opioid deaths, it can be overwhelming when you hear the large numbers, which are really staggering throughout the state. But especially relevant for this is that UCLA Health put out a study just recently that said that 22 adolescents, 14 to 18, die in the U.S. every week in 2022 from drug overdoses, mostly due to fentanyl and counterfeit pills. So 22 young adolescents a week died in 2022. We're doing a couple things in the legislature. Last year we passed something called Melanie's Law, and this is really about having high schools incorporate opioid overdose protocols in their school safety plans. And that is something that's passed and is being implemented now. We have legislation, my colleague Senator Portantino in Southern California, which would mandate schools to provide Narcan nasal spray to students and free test strips to test their narcotics when Narcan isn't readily available. So a lot of what we're doing is trying to increase access to both those test strips, but also to Narcan itself. So we had Narcan, we were the first legislative office to train all of our staff in Narcan and to have Narcan in our office. And as someone said, I think what Michael was saying about removing the stigma of carrying Narcan, and this is all preventative because, as we saw in the video, none of those kids in that video recognized that they were, intentionally was taking anything that remotely connected to fentanyl, and that's why we have to be. That's why we have to be so careful. We do have a package of bills this year because it's. When I was asked by the news media earlier today about access, the reality is access is too widely available at fentanyl, and it's coming in from lots of different sources. And so that's why it is really a two-front war, so to speak. One is trying to prevent that, and we do have a package of bills that I'm a co-author on around fentanyl, additional package around some other aspects, but particularly around penalties. And we do have to make it very clear that anyone dealing in this, anyone supplying this, they know this is lethal and they will be held accountable. So we are doing that, absolutely. But the other piece of that is that preparation, again, knowing that some of it is going to slip through somehow, that we prepare with Narcan and with test strips. But really the third leg of that is education. It's just no matter what we do on drugs, we were talking with Liz, kids and adults have been experimenting with drugs for a long time. So we're always going to be, someone's going to be experimenting with something, and we have to make sure that that does not turn into an accidental overdose and an accidental death, as we saw here and as we've experienced in our own community. But some people thought, I think wrongly so, that having Narcan widely available was somehow encouraging this. And I think now with public health, we've kind of gotten the message out that no, that's not the case. It's not. This is a preventive that's necessary, and we have to be ready, and we have to provide this. So in the legislature, we also worked on something called the California Campus Opioid Safety Act, and that's the one specifically that requires most public colleges and universities to offer students free Narcan. If you want Narcan for an organization you're affiliated with, have an adult leader reach out to my office. My district director, Nicole Fernandez, is here, has been a real leader on this, and we're happy to direct you. So again, I want to thank the Youth Commission. I know you're working on all kinds of important issues for the community, but this is the first gathering of its kind that I know of that is a youth-led effort. And what we've seen is that something can spread. I was just talking to Erica, and she was saying that 8 years ago with you, Lizzie Ragsdale started this effort around defibrillators, and something that has now spread across the state. We have legislation, and now has saved countless lives through that. And that was started, she was saying, started here 8 years ago. So hoping that this youth summit will also spread and save countless lives. And I just thank you. Thanks to the students again. Thank you to Brandon, my intern, also for helping shepherd me here and guide me in all of this. And I just want to thank all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Becker. Our next speaker will be Ms. Mary Taylor Fullerton, Clinical Services Manager, and Mrs. Candice Kane, who is a case manager from the San Mateo County Behavioral Health and Recovery. Ms. Fullerton has been with San Mateo County for over 16 years, and she created the Integrated Medication-Assisted Treatment team to help those with opioid and alcohol abuse. Last May, she led the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors study session reviewing the fentanyl crisis in San Mateo County. Today, Ms. Fullerton and Ms. Candice Kane will discuss the fentanyl awareness, an overview of the opioid crisis and what is working.
Thank you so much, Anya. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary, and this is Candice here, part of my team. Camilo is also part of my team, and they'll be picking up whatever I miss, so remember how. I'm truly humbled to be here and to be included in this. Anya, it feels like you reached out to me, I don't know how many months ago, and I had to go back and relook at the email and this is coming from a youth commission, because we get all sorts of requests to talk about fentanyl and what's happening and the work our team does, but that the request came from you and from the youth commission. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And so I really feel grateful and honored to be here, to be talking about this. This is our passion. This is what we do 7 days a week. And so it's really amazing to see the energy, the interest, and that it's coming from youth too. So I'm truly grateful for that. And I really hope that this is with the Youth Commission, speaking to those of you part of it, on the school board around it. I really hope this is the start of something. I really hope, you talked about email threads, keep me on it, keep it coming, because I really hope this is the start of something. Our county, with opioid settlement dollars, so our team is in part funded by opioid settlement dollars through the litigation that's happening across the state and our country. And one of the cool new things that we're doing starting Monday, we have a new position, a community health planner that Nancy will be in touch about as well. And her role will be to start a more formalized opioid coalition. And so my goal is we've already started training county libraries. So we've trained 70 librarians across the county of San Mateo to understand the opioid epidemic, a bit of what I'll share with you all here today, and to learn about naloxone, about Narcan, and to administer naloxone. So that's happening now. And so the librarians had the most amazing questions. I mean, I guess that's the nature of librarians. They're really cool people. And so there's a lot of really great efforts happening. And so that this is happening today here, led by youth, it's really inspiring to the work we do. So with that, I'll jump into a few of the slides and info that I was asked to talk about today. So I want to talk a bit about just pulling back. Like how did we get here? Okay, so what are we talking about when we talk about opioid crisis? We're talking about opioids. What are opioids? These are all opioids. Fentanyl, which we'll talk quite a bit about today, is an opioid. It's a class of medication that can be prescribed to induce pleasure and reduce pain. Fentanyl has been used surgically in surgeries for many, 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 many years. Okay, and so it is not only an illicit substance that is being laced into counterfeit pills and poisoning people. It has been something that has been manufactured and used in a medical way for many, many years. The reason that people prescribe and use opioids is because it produces a euphoria or high. They can be extremely addictive, and if you ever had a need to reduce pain, say you were in a car accident, you had to have surgery, opioids can be really helpful, right? And so it's not that opioids in of itself are bad, it's the illicit market and the way that synthetic opioids are being manufactured and put into street drugs. One of the key things about opioids is that you need higher levels to achieve the same effect. And this is how we got into a crisis going back a few decades. And so if, say, I remember I had my wisdom teeth out, say 30 years ago, and at the time, before we knew what we know today, I went home with 15, 20 Percocets. Right? That doesn't happen today. If you have a wisdom tooth pulled, you may go home and maybe you get a prescription for ibuprofen that maybe you don't take or need or fill. But the way in which we prescribe opioids today has changed, thank goodness, because of this. So this is called the 3 waves of the opioid epidemic. And so it is shifted now to include a 4th wave, which I'll talk about. But going back to the 1990s, early 2000s, we had the invention and the creation of Oxycontin. In 1996, this was introduced, and if you've watched any of the Netflix documentaries that talk about the Sackler family, Purdue Pharma, you'll see that there was mass lying, misinformation, deception of the public, of physicians, of the medical community. I was talking to someone earlier about Dr. Lemke. She's got a great book around drug dealer MD, how doctors were duped in the medical profession and what we can do about it. And so there was this whole storms. This is the orange line, the wave 1 here, right? And you started to see individuals dying related to opioid overdoses. And so one clarification just from a terminology, you can overdose and not die. So overdose doesn't equal death. And I think that gets used sometimes, and someone said they overdosed. And so we work with a lot of people every single day in the emergency department who come in because they have overdosed. I saw someone in a shift report last week who met with someone in jail who had overdosed 12 times. And every time his life had been saved by naloxone. So you can overdose and have your life saved by naloxone on opiates on purpose, by accident. But this is what was happening with prescription pills in that orange, that wave 1. When the transition happened and DEA started clamping down on how much you could prescribe and what was prescribed, what happened is people who had that tolerance established, so I had that surgery, I was sent home with 15 Percocets, and now I need to keep taking that because my brain has adapted to it. There's a physiological change in your brain. And so your body and your brain is used to having that level of opioids. You need more because of tolerance. This is just basic science of addiction. And you need more to achieve the same level of effect. And if your doctor is now not unable to prescribe or unwilling to prescribe, your brain and body are saying, but I still need the same effect. And this is dependence. So this is a substance dependence. And this is your body and brain. This is what makes addiction a disease of the brain and not a moral failing. Okay, it's a physiological change in the structure of a brain. So an individual who has been using, who is in a state of dependence, what happens is they seek anything else. So what happens in this, 2010, 2014 is that blue wave. So that was the transition to heroin, which at the time was more accessible on the street. And so here on the West Coast, we saw more black tar heroin. On the East Coast, there was more white powder available. That was just the nature of drug distribution, manufacturing, cartel. The red scary line with the dotted hockey stick effect, this is what we're here to talk about today. So this is the introduction and the shift And the third wave to synthetic opioids. Fentanyl is cheaper and easier to manufacture. If I'm trying to manufacture heroin, I need to have fields of poppies, and I need to make sure that they're not confiscated or crops are destroyed, and it takes a lot more to transport a whole ton of heroin to achieve the same effect of fentanyl, because fentanyl is so concentrated and so powerful and strong. So drug manufacturers, drug dealers figured this out really quickly and said, why would I bother and waste time manufacturing and trying to transport heroin when I can move a lot more fentanyl? I can make it faster, easier, cheaper, and I can mix it into drugs easier. So from that business mentality, we had this red wave of overdose deaths. The fourth wave, which I mentioned, which we're seeing here in our county as well, is this mixture. So per coroner reports, for things that we're seeing at the emergency department, individuals are not overdosing and dying on fentanyl only. It's fentanyl plus stimulants. And by stimulants in this context county, mostly it's methamphetamines and cocaine, so stimulants. And so we're seeing this, and we're hearing reports from clients of, using fentanyl intentionally to have that central nervous system depressant, right, is what the opioid is doing. It's reducing pain, reducing pleasure, and then the stimulant to get the high or the up. And so we're having people say, well, I do the stimulant when I go to work, and I'm working 3 jobs or serving, driving, whatever I'm doing, and that stimulant helps me be productive and work, and then I need to crash, so I take the fentanyl. So that combination, those of you that maybe were around in the 80s, like speedball, goofball, it's that same mentality, but with something more lethal today. So that fourth wave, and the graphics from the CDC, and I just haven't caught up with this yet, but as we get more drug death data reported, you'll start to see this fourth wave added. This is another visual. I'm a visual person. These images help things stick with me. So just a look at the last 20 years or so of what has happened. This is not just happening in rural parts of America. This is happening across the country. This is happening in our neighborhood. This is happening in our yard. My team works with the entire county of San Mateo. I've been in this county 17 years, working in this job about 17 years, and I truly have never seen what we're seeing now. It really is scary, and I can put myself in that position of being a kid, and my elders saying, well, things are different today, and the pot's stronger, and this is that, but the lethality, and it's really, it's really concerning today. The 75%, so of the nearly 107,000 drug overdose deaths in 2021 involved in opioid, 75%. So we know people are dying related to this opioid, so what we're talking about with fentanyl in particular, mostly the synthetic opioids in the drug supply. I always love to talk about Dr. Vivek Murthy. So he's our current U.S. Surgeon General. He was our Surgeon General under the Obama administration. He called this out in 2016. He was the first U.S. Surgeon General to write a report on addiction in America, a public health crisis, and called out that there are 20 million Americans who have a substance use disorder. That's 2016. In 2021, we've doubled that. 46 million Americans have a substance use disorder. These are not going in the right direction. This is a startling impact. And so, yes, the pandemic has exacerbated many with mental health, with substance use disorders. But he also called out, I used to say 5 years ago, which is when I started doing this, but 2016 was more than that. So 8 years ago now, he called out 10% of people get meaningful help. 10% of people who have a diagnosed substance use disorder seek meaningful help. That means 90% of the people who have a substance use disorder, who are dealing with addiction, are not seeking help. And you know why? The survey from Department of Health and Human Services goes into it. Most feel like they didn't need help, they didn't know where to get it, or they were ashamed, embarrassed, stigma. So that combination is what kept people from seeking help. And in the latest survey of 2021 from the Health and Human Services National Survey, 5% of people with a substance use disorder were seeking help. Again, the pandemic absolutely made things more challenging for people to seek help. We were all kind of huddled in our homes and trying to be safe out there. But there's a huge percentage of individuals that are struggling with addiction that are not seeking help. And so raising awareness, lowering the threshold and addressing stigma are huge components which is why anytime we get a chance to come talk about stuff like this and to share who we are and what we do, we're really, really happy to. So thanks again for having us here. And I thought, interestingly, I added this in for purposes of today, but the highest percentage of those, this is the 2021 survey, the highest percentage of those with substance use disorders in the past year was 18 to 25-year-olds. So that's a population that's growing the most with substance use disorders. And it absolutely is tied in to what we're seeing with this epidemic. It's also tied into the fact that during the pandemic, wasn't Instacart like the most beautiful thing? If you hadn't used Instacart before, the pandemic came and it was like, wow, I can have all my groceries delivered to my house. Now, you can also have alcohol delivered to your house, right? And now we know via Snapchat and Instagram and other social media outlets, you can also have drugs delivered. And those are most likely, almost definitely going to not be what you think they are and contain counterfeit pills. And so that shift in practices of the way people get substances, the way we have alcohol delivered to our house, the way we're getting pills, and an online presence, right? It used to be that kids, accessing drugs, you'd have to go to a party and someone's got a bowl of something or get something here. But now you can be in your room on your smartphone and have access to substances. So the way in which the access, that's why that population too is growing. Jerome Adams was the U.S. Surgeon General 2017 to 21, and this is him holding some naloxone, right? He shares a very personal story about his brother, who as a Black American was stigmatized, fell into a pattern with opioids, was incarcerated, and he speaks very openly about the plight and calls out that in order to address the public health crisis, that the way we as a society view opioid disorder, it has to change. The individual lives and the health of our nation depend on it. And so he really called out the spotlight on opioids and addressing the stigma behind it, and particularly with Black Americans. So again, we're doing kind of a national picture here of how did we get here, what's happening. So we know that overdose deaths, as I shared, have been the highest during the first year of the pandemic. They rose to the highest levels ever recorded in a single year. It was 699,000 individuals. And that's what was reported in coroner death data. There are absolutely individuals who have died where our epidemiology spent years combing through data where you may see on a death certificate cardiac arrest. And when you look into the data, you see that maybe there were methamphetamines on board. And so, again, the reporting and recording of this data is really cumbersome, and especially during the years, the early years of the pandemic with COVID, as coroner cases were inundated with COVID, the drug overdose death data was impacted as well. So that's why we don't have great data still on that. We know that of the deaths reported 2021, 75% were attributed to synthetic opioids, mainly fentanyl, nationwide. And also important to note, just from a cultural perspective, that in the early years of the epidemic, it was worse among white Americans in rural suburban areas, and today Black Americans have the highest related overdose deaths attributed to synthetic. And that is true here in this county as well. And so disproportionately, this is an issue that tends to impact individuals in minority groups who do not historically have access. And so the work our team does, we work largely with folks who are from underserved communities, who are undocumented, underinsured, or uninsured, and we try to make sure that those services are available. Okay, so we've talked a lot about fentanyl. This is the basic crash course. I know some other folks will talk a bit about, so I'll go through very quickly. You'll see these slides where you see, like, this is a lethal dose of heroin or fentanyl. That much. So the distinguish between, how much heroin you may need versus how much fentanyl is a lethal dose. It's a manufactured opioid drug, extremely strong, addictive. It can be injectable, lozenge, patches. There were lollipops for end-stage cancer patients. Most street fentanyl is tasteless, odorless, and colorless, which makes it impossible to detect. In order to detect fentanyl, you very often need to send it out to a special lab because there are so many analogs, right? It's being manufactured, it's synthetic. So to be able to test it, I know for our county, at our hospital, we don't have an in-hospital lab that can test all the analogs of fentanyl. So we have to send samples out. It's very often added to and used by other street dogs, very often unknown to user. We do have, because our team works with folks who are chronically addicted and using, we have folks that are choosing fentanyl. So there's a spectrum of individuals who are choosing and using fentanyl as part of their daily practice, and there's the spectrum of individuals who are not choosing, and it is an unknown or unexpected overdose. I mentioned the fourth wave again, which is fentanyl plus stimulants, and so we can't not address methamphetamines. It continues to inundate our psych emergency, it continues to inundate our coroner's office, narcotics task force, and so methamphetamines continue to be one of the most significant substances that we have here in this county and in the Bay Area. So this comes from Song for Charlie, which has been mentioned many times. In 2020, youth drug deaths are the fastest growing populations than any others. It was mentioned earlier, kids have always experimented. Kids will always experiment. It's just part of the developmental process. But what is being experimented now is more lethal, right, because of fentanyl. So this is why the drug death data reflects that. So can you tell of all these pills, there's an image of which one's real or fake. The one the arrow is pointing to, that's 30 milligrams of Adderall. That's the only real pill. This image just shows you the sophistication and the level of the counterfeit pills that are out there. Right, and so you can look at a pill, and we've had clients say, like, well, I looked at it, I did the stamp, I did the drug match online, it looked like it was the right thing, it looked like it was a Xanabar, and in fact it wasn't. But the sophistication of the pills that are out there is even if you think you're getting something from a bottle, from a friend, from their mother's, grandmother's cabinet's closet, it very likely could be fake. I mentioned our coroner drug death data. So this is San Mateo County, 2017 to 2021. So this mirrors a bit of the three waves, the fourth wave being that blue dotted line. So you can see right about 2020 here in this county in San Mateo, our drug-related deaths by fentanyl only, which is this blue line here, basically plummeted. And what increased was fentanyl plus other stimulants. So namely methamphetamine, some cocaine, but that is what we're seeing more of now in our drug death data here. Here in San Mateo County, we have not had the heroin-related overdose deaths the way other counties have. So this is the second wave, which was a bit higher in the early 20-teens, but we don't tend to see a lot of heroin drug overdose deaths. We see more of the synthetic, and now more of the synthetic fentanyl plus stimulants. Okay, let's take a collective breath and talk about what's working, right? What resources we have, because I know that this is it's a heavy topic and it feels kind of overwhelming and depressing, but there are things we can do about it, and there are things that are working. Two of whom are sitting here right now. I love these guys. So treatment works. We know that treatment works. We also know that 95% of people who have a substance use disorder are not seeking treatment. So we have a lot of work to do to make the treatment that we have available more accessible and fit. So psychosocial interventions, coaching, counseling, and medication-assisted treatment. This is what our team does. And so if your brain has been restructured by drugs or substances, one thing our team does is help work with physicians, trained addiction medicine specialists, to help you rewire the brain. Right? And so what that looks like with medication-assisted treatment is it rebalances brain chemistry, eliminate physiological cravings, it can block the pleasure caused by alcohol and opioids, regulate body functions, because the majority of times when people are using substances, one of the biggest fears initially is the withdrawal, getting off the substance, because it's so painful and it's so triggering and it's so easy to just be able to use again and stop the pain. And so in that interstitial space, this is where these guys come in a hospital setting, or on the street, or in jail, or in detox, or all the places that we are 7 days a week, to come in and say, hey, have you thought about changing your relationship with alcohol? Have you thought about changing your relationship with opioids? Did you know there are medications that can help you do that in a way that's safe, that's not addictive, and that can help you get into recovery and start recovery your way? And so that's what we do, whether we're offering a bus token, whether we're driving someone to detox, whether we are, getting clothes for someone who is brought in somewhere. I mean, so there's a whole host of interventions that just start with addressing the person first, reducing stigma and shame, telling someone, hey, I'm glad you're alive, I'm glad you're here. and helping them feel welcome to help define and start their recovery their way. So that's what our team is about. We use harm reduction. We believe harm reduction saves lives. So if any of you drive here today, put a seatbelt on, congratulations, you used harm reduction. You know, we saw the sun today. If any of you put sunscreen on today, that's a form of harm reduction. You're not going to hide in your house because the sun is out, but as a way to reduce harmful UV rays, you use sunscreen. So harm reduction is things like carrying naloxone. Okay? We also use non-stigmatizing language because, as we know, stigma is one of the biggest barriers for people accessing help and talking about what's going on. Right? So we don't call people addicts, users, junkies. We talk about people who use substances because they're people. We don't call someone clean or dirty. So these individuals, someone who's using substances, has a positive drug screen, things like that. A couple other folks are going to be talking about naloxone. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but we've mentioned naloxone. So naloxone is the medication. Narcan is the brand name. Narcan reverses opioid overdose. Remember I said you can overdose, and you can overdose and die. You can overdose and have it reversed with Narcan as well. Very few negative effects. In fact, my old medical director, 15 years ago, when you talk about Narcan in the presentation, would Narcan himself. So, I mean, older presentation, he's now retired, but it's that safe. And he'd say, look, if I had opioids in my system right now, that could have saved my life or prevented overdose. But this is how safe Narcan is. Watch, I'll show you. He used the expired, this physician term, he would use an expired box, right? Because that's not something you can hand out to a patient. So we use an expired and just spray the Narcan. We do that now in our training with the librarians a couple weeks ago. So we took an expired box just to show, like, hey, it's just a puff. It's like Afrin. If anyone used nasal spray or had allergies and you use Afrin, that's basically what you're doing. You're putting in this little tube and you're just giving them that. I know some folks are talking about the signs too. One interesting point about the signs, the pinpoint pupils is something that tends to get called a lot, like, oh, that's a classic sign of opioid intoxication, opioid overdose. Something our pharmacist mentioned a couple weeks ago at the training is she said she doesn't focus on that as much anymore because of the combination we're seeing with methamphetamine. So because the polysubstance use that's out there, pinpoint pupils could be an indication that someone's on opioids, but it may not be. They may not have pinpoint pupils. So if someone doesn't have pinpoint pupils, it doesn't mean that they're not overdosing. The not responding, the slow breath, the gurgling sounds, the blue lips, that is pretty clear. I mean, what that means is like the oxygen's not getting to the brain, the central nervous system has been depressed, and so Narcan, naloxone is needed to reverse that. This is a really cool thing, you guys. I'm super happy to share. I don't know, actually, we don't really need volume. I mean, this is a quick video. Oh, wait. So this is my buddy Daryl. He works at the San Mateo County Jail. And Daryl and I, I don't have the video set up on yet, that's okay. We'll show that later. So what Daryl is doing, Daryl's in the San Mateo County Jail at McGuire, down in Redwood City. And we had this machine installed. This is a free naloxone vending machine. So if you're in Redwood City and you pop into the jail lobby, you don't have to go to jail or talk to anybody. You just walk in and you can go into jail and you push that button that he's about to push there, and all it asks for is a zip code. That's it. So no personal information, just a zip code. And the reason it gives a zip code is because it gives you resources, mental health resources, substance treatment resources, food bank resources, shelter resources in the zip code where you are. So this is now installed and it's free. And then you push a button, and on that screen, what you see up top there, is it's a video of how to use naloxone. So as you're waiting for your free box to pop out, you're getting your training of how to administer Narcan. Okay, so that's free, and that exists now in our jail. I just had a meeting yesterday with our medical director, and we're going to be installing something similar. This is a very fancy, expensive one. We're going to be installing something similar at all of our mental health regional clinics. Okay. And we got approval from our county supervisor office this week to install one at our navigation center, which is a shelter, a non-congregate shelter in Redwood City across from the Maple Street jail and the probation down there. So in the next month or two, we'll have a few of these naloxone vending machines. One of our next goals, just to put this out there, school boards, is to have this available in other public locations too. So maybe community centers, maybe schools, maybe libraries, right? So places where people want to congregate. what we've heard from folks is like, hey, this is great that you have this free naloxone vending machine. I don't want to go to jail to get it, right? Like, I don't want to see anybody down there. And so having it in places like, so the hospital, so places where people might be, where you can go up and walk and get free Narcan naloxone. As a side note, you can walk up to Candace or Camilo and get free Narcan naloxone as well. So at the San Mateo Medical Center, our team, the IMAT team, we're there again 7 days a week. You can call. Someone was reminding me, like, don't register, because it can take hours, you know, depending on how busy it is. Ask to speak to IMAT. Walk into, this is the one behind the Hillsdale Mall, right? They used to call it CHOPE. The San Mateo County Medical Center and the emergency department, you know, great security, whoever's on there, super friendly. Like, hey, I need to talk to an IMAT case manager. And then one of these lovely people will come out. Mikhail is there today until, I don't know, whatever time, and then Candace is going back this afternoon. And you can say, hey, I heard that you guys can help me get Narcan or fentanyl test strips, and they will hand you a box. There's no questions asked, there's no concerns, so we want to make it as easy as possible. We also have fentanyl test strips there. You can order these on Amazon now. This is what I was just talking about, how to obtain spray. So you can also go into pharmacies, Walgreens, CVS. What I've heard and what I've experienced, many pharmacies are keeping it locked, so it's not, you know, accessible. Again, this is not a narcotic, it's not at risk of being stolen, but so some pharmacies make it a bit harder to get because you got to wait for someone to come with a key and open the cabinet, right? It's about $44, between $40 and $46, depending on where you go. And I have heard too, and experienced at least at a couple pharmacies that they were out of stock. And so, you know, if you're looking to get it from a pharmacy, you can get a prescription from your provider, and then it can be covered by insurance as well. You can also order it on Amazon. So this is like Target, Walgreens. Just, you know, as you're doing your Target shopping, you can throw in a box of naloxone. And as I said, that's our phone number there. We have flyers and handouts. So we'll make these available today, English and Spanish, for our team, phone number. And then this is all about our team here. This is a flyer that you can get today. There's here, this is how to contact us, recovery resources. And I think that's about it. That's it. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Fullerton. So we have a small change in the program, and we're gonna have Ms. Walker go right now instead of Superintendent Magee. Okay, so first we're gonna play this short video. Before I play the video, I'll.
Thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I just thought it would be good. I have a presentation. I want to throw some of that away and just talk to the kids in this audience. My son passed away 2.5 years ago now from ordering drugs on Snapchat that had fentanyl. And this short video is going to tell you a little bit about his story, and then I want to talk to you about how we got here. So let's just jump right in. It's a 2-minute video, and then we'll talk, okay?
A lot of kids today know about the dangers of fentanyls, but fentanyl isn't just in fake pills anymore. It's also making its way into common party drugs like cocaine and Molly. Take Colin, for example. He was funny, good in school, loved sports, but for years, Colin had struggled with depression and was actively seeking help with his family. So when COVID hit, Colin was affected more than most.
COVID was a big change for him. When the lockdown started, he began to spend a lot more time in his room with his door closed.
There's just something off, really off, those last 2 weeks of his life. He wasn't suicidal. He felt very depressed.
Colin Walker died in his bedroom after consuming what he thought was cocaine, but was actually fentanyl, a synthetic painkiller up to 100 times more potent than morphine. It was discovered that though Colin had only taken a small amount, he had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. He was 17 years old. Colin didn't die from a drug overdose. He was fatally poisoned by fentanyl disguised as another drug. Illicit fentanyl is a rapidly growing industry in America. It's an ideal raw material for drug dealers because it's cheap, easy to get and extremely potent. The bottom line is that this is all about money, and people ages 15 to 25 are the ones suffering. Fentanyl is involved in 80% of youth drug deaths, higher than any other age group. Of youth deaths involving cocaine, 86% also involve fentanyl. Drug sellers don't know for sure if their products contain fentanyl or other chemicals. Learn about the proper use of fentanyl test strips and naloxone. Don't let you or your friend's story end like Colin's. Using street drugs is risky enough, but with the flood of fentanyl into the streets, it's becoming deadly. You didn't create this problem, but you can be part of the solution. Help us spread the word. Fentanyl kills nearly 5,000 kids a year just like Colin. It's not just pills. Street drugs aren't safe either. To learn more about how you can keep you and your friends safe, visit songforcharlie.org.
So, my name's Liz Walker, and I want to just have you raise your hand if you're under 25 in this room. Thank you. Yes, you are under 25. I just can tell you. Thank you for being here, because you are the ones that are going to make a difference. Whether you are in middle school or younger, or you're in high school, or you're about to go to college, you may never yourself make a really bad decision like my son made. For whatever reason he did it, and he had a lot of reasons. He felt awful. He was totally isolated during COVID. He had anxiety and depression from a young age that we tried to get him help for. And that is one reason that people go to drugs, because you know what? It will take away that awful feeling, even if it's for a few minutes. That's why my son did it, right? And it made it so easy. And for the parents in here, we didn't grow up with these phones. Like, after Colin died, I'm like, what? But he was in his bedroom. He was safe. But wait, my son wrote thank you notes. I made sure he was a good kid, like so many of you here, right? But I couldn't protect him from this total isolation of COVID. And he was even more isolated because my husband and I did what we thought was the right thing. We had found out about 6 months before the lockdown that Colin had been self-medicating by smoking marijuana. Now, compared to what he died from, marijuana, part of me is like, I wish we had never clamped down. But we said 0 tolerance. You may not use drugs. Oh, Mom, but it's legal in California when you're 21, right? Mom, you're overreacting. People have been, well, all my friends do it. Well, guess what? Find new friends. Because that's not you. You're not going there. And man, maybe I overreacted, but I made him sit down with me, and I'm like, this is not happening to my kid. My kid is not going to be in these pictures you see on billboards or in movies where someone became addicted and lost their life. No, Colin, you sit right down. Let's watch this movie. It's called Beautiful Boy. And it was a dad who was like me, and he wasn't going to have a kid that died that way either. But his kid ended up in the streets in San Francisco and almost died several times. But his kid didn't have this thing called fentanyl that was around. So it's not fair to people in your generation. You could make mistakes before. Colin could have made a mistake before, but not now, right? And so that's why I'm here talking to you today. I want you all to have the information, and Mary gave you so much good information. So I'm going to skip over those slides because you've seen some of them. I'm going to talk to you about, I think Senator Becker said it, like drugs have been around, or ways that you can feel out of how you are feeling right now. For people with anxiety and depression, that's pretty enticing. If you feel so lonely, if you feel like you don't have any friends, if you feel anxious and depressed, and something can take you away from that, there's a lot of reasons when people use drugs. I've met a lot of parents who've lost children, not their kids, they weren't unhappy, they didn't have depression and anxiety like Colin. They were just curious. They wanted to know, like, what would this drug make me feel like? What would this make me feel like? And that's a fairly normal teenage behavior, right? Just curious. And the other thing Colin did have in common with a lot of these kids whose parents have lost kids is he was a major risk taker. Colin, if you said like, hey, whoa, let's not jump off that cliff there, the next thing you know, you turned around and he'd be jumping into the water, in Hawaii somewhere, and you're like, okay. Luckily he was okay that time. But that's another teenage thing. It's just kind of normal. You take risks. And why I wanted to know who's under 25 in this room is like, your parents are scared to death of what is out there, of what you could come across on Snapchat, etc. But they're not the ones that can make the decision. And I don't know if Colin actually knew this, if he would have done anything different, because that anxiety was so bad. But the kids that you saw in that video, some of them, one is a good friend now. Her son just got his acceptance letter to UCLA. And he bought something on Snapchat, and they walked into his bedroom and found him dead. Another one was like, the parents had what I would say the luxury of finding out that their kid had been exposed to fentanyl. And as a parent, I kept wondering, what if I had known that Colin was buying these drugs on Snapchat? What if I had known that there was fentanyl in them? I could have sent him away somewhere. And I've met parents who've done that too. It's like, you're the only, and their kid died still. Because it's one of the most addictive drugs, right? And so you're the only people who can make the decision. And so this is kind of where I talked to Songbird Charlie about, like, in the past, like Senator Becker said, it's like, it was kind of a journey. You could maybe dabble, experiment, decide this isn't right for me. And now it's a minefield. So my message to you is, if you could just not walk into that field that is full of bombs to begin with, that would be the best thing you could do. Just assume. These are the assumptions. If you ever get curious or you're ever so anxious and depressed you want to try drugs, just know almost everything that is out there is laced with fentanyl now. If someone says they've tested it and it doesn't have fentanyl, they're lying to you. Okay? And that fentanyl is just found in all drugs. And so this is the graphic I like to just show. This is in the past. This is when your parents grew up, when I grew up. Like, people might experiment. There might be people in your friend group that do more than experiment. They start using it occasionally. They like what that feeling is. They might start using it a little more, and before they become a habitual user, there's opportunities for, like, one, they get caught, right? And they are, they have an intervention. Two, they just get older, right? You're not as you don't take as many risks the older you get once you have to go to college or have a job or other responsibilities. You might just go, whoa, I'm using too much. My friends come and say, like, hey, you're not fun to be around anymore. So you might cut back. If that doesn't work, you could then become a habitual user. You become dependent on the drug, and then you take too much of that drug and you overdose. And sometimes if you overdose, you die. This could be over a period of years. Today's drug landscape looks like this. Okay? It could be the first time you decide, I want to experiment with this. I take something I got on Snapchat. Someone told me it was a Vicodin. Someone told me it was a Xanax. And boom, that's it. Game over. Right? So, this is a very short way of saying, because I know, first of all, if Colin was in this room, he would have tuned out about 5 minutes ago. Right? Almost when I started talking. So I'm going to keep this short because I want you all to know, here's some important things. You may never try drugs yourself. That's what I would recommend. Is this way too dangerous right now? But realistically, you might. And if you might know someone who is struggling with depression, anxiety, and then they want to try drugs. So here's some things that my son didn't know, but I hope you know today in this presentation. 1, ask for help. Ask for help if you're struggling. If Colin had come to me and said, Mom, I'm in over my head. I ordered this stuff on Snapchat. I don't know what was in it, but I can't stop ordering it. I would have done anything. And it still might not have been enough, right? But ask for help if you're struggling. Watch out for each other, okay? If you know a friend of yours is really super depressed and anxious, like, talk to them, try to get them help. If you know a friend of yours has ordered stuff on Snapchat and they come to you and say, hey, I just got this pill, it makes me feel incredible. For once in this teenage life, don't worry about being a snitch, okay? Go and tell someone. Do it through an anonymous letter, whatever. If someone had just slipped me a note saying, hey, you should know that your son is ordering stuff on Snapchat, I'm worried about him. Still might not have been enough to save him, but it could have been. Right? This stuff is just, it's way above anything that anyone should have to deal with. Know the risks. And I said this at Colin's service to all of his friends that were there. You are not invincible. This actually can happen to you. It can happen to someone you love. And in the end, if it happens to you, it happens to your parents. Because my husband and my life will never be the same because of what my son tried to do to help the awful feelings that were in his head. And you're doing this right now, and that's why I'm super impressed and proud of the people that are putting this on. Spread the word and keep your friends safe. And again, your friends may be safe right now, and your friends in college may never do this either. But at some point, you will know someone, hopefully it's not you, but they will be exposed to this. And you'll hear a lot today about Narcan or fentanyl testing strips, and all of those things are really good. As Mary said, they're harm reduction. But it's like we, of course, should have a fire extinguisher in our house in case there's a fire. And of course, it's good to have Narcan because someone could overdose and you could save their life. But don't run into the burning building, okay, if you don't have to. Have that insurance, but don't need it, because I do now know, because of what Colin was exposed to, if he hadn't died, the likelihood is he would have faced a whole life of addiction. And that's another thing, that it's just not worth taking the risk, right? So I can't get him back. My 2 other kids won't get their brother back. All of these kids from age 13, I think, this kid over here, to all of those kids are under 18 and under. Their families can't get them back, but you can make sure that you spread the word and tell people how serious this is. That's it. Okay? That's all I want to tell you. And I want to see, and it's totally fine if you don't have any questions, because the last thing I know one of my kids would want to do is ask a question right now. But if you have any questions, we have a couple minutes, and I'm happy to answer them. Oh, I have a question for myself. Okay. So Liz, as a parent, what do you wish? Because I get asked this one. I'm sure someone's going to ask it, but maybe people don't want to be the first one. As a parent who has lost a kid to fentanyl, what do you wish you could do differently if you had a chance to do it again? I would have not had COVID happen, because then my son wouldn't have been as isolated as he was. He lost the people who was smoking marijuana with because we told him no, and then he was 100% alone. I wish that Snapchat or other social media didn't make it so easy for these drugs to be distributed. And I know some people are suing Snapchat right now to say, hey, you're selling drugs on your platform. And after Colin died, let me tell you also, be careful about what you put on your Snapchat or your social media, because if something ever happens, it's really hard for me to see the stuff that was happening. I do believe that Snapchat needs to do more to take drugs off their platform. But if we shut Snapchat down tomorrow, there's another social media site. So just for young people in this, just social media, it makes things easy, but just know that you're only hurting yourself. Like you can lie to your parents and you can lie to a lot of other people. Colin did, he was really good at that. And he lived, he was smart enough that he could have gone to Stanford before I went. He just used his intelligence in a way to just hide things. And what was number 3? Number 3, I wish that fentanyl had never entered the market, because then the illicit market, because then maybe my son would have had a chance to get help with what other people, was kind of a normal rite of passage, isn't anymore. All right.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Okay, everyone. So we're going to start now. So we will next be hearing from Dr. Frenkel and Mr. Carmona. They both work at Mills-Peninsula Medical Center. So Dr. Frenkel is an ER physician who graduated from Georgetown University School of Medicine and trained at the University of California at San Diego. He's an advocate for mental health awareness in and out of the hospital. Mr. Carmona is a dedicated clinical nurse educator who has been responsible for administering the take-home naloxone distribution program for the past 2 years. He is retired after 21 years of service from the U.S. Navy as a naval aviator. They both will be speaking today on Narcan, life-saving antidote to fentanyl. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me without this? Do I need to?
Yeah.
I'm Sam. I assume you guys have heard pretty much all this before, so we'll go through the slides. If you have questions, please just interrupt me and we'll try and learn something. So the main thing, so we're talking mostly about fentanyl today, but there are a lot of different drugs in this class that all do the same thing effectively. Here are the list of them. There are many more. They go by many names. In general, they all look the same and they all generally respond to the same medication, which is Narcan, which is what we've been talking about. The signs of opiates, I think you all probably had built into your brains at this point. The easiest ones to recognize is somebody who's really difficult to wake up, difficult to arouse. So if you've ever seen it in movies, people get shaken and they don't move. You open their eyes, you pull their eye open and shine a flashlight in there, the pupil will be very small. And it will react a little bit, but not very much. They'll both be very small. And generally they're breathing very slowly, if at all. You guys can interrupt me if you have questions, otherwise we're going to go through this quickly. All right, how Narcan works. So there are these pain receptors throughout the body and the brain. There's C fibers that have the opioid receptor on them, which is boring for any of you. Essentially, the way that opiates work is they bind that receptor and they cause all of these effects, along with dulling pain. Narcan binds that same receptor but doesn't activate it. So instead of getting in there and causing the receptor to do what it's supposed to do, it essentially is like the defensive line in football. It's supposed to block the receptor from doing anything. It also, if there's something on there, it tries to kick it off. The idea there being, instead of having the effect of the opiate, it stops it so you're back to where you were. The reason why we have everyone call these gentlemen over here when you use Narcan is because So Narcan will work very quickly. It takes about a minute to really kick in. It'll get all around your body as long as your heart is beating. It'll go all the way around. It'll start doing its job. It then only works for a certain period of time, depending on which narcotic was given or taken. That effect may come back into play. All the Narcan will get out of your body. So you'll go back to being asleep and not breathing, which obviously can be really dangerous. So that's why we had you call 911 after you're giving this medicine. Which is what I just said here. There's no real risk to giving this in the general population. So I would say the biggest takeaway for me is if you see someone who's laying on the ground, who isn't breathing, you're worried that they've overdosed on anything, it's very reasonable to give Narcan. If it's something else, you're not going to hurt them at all. If it is an opiate and they've overdosed on it, you can potentially save their life. There is some need to give even more than just this amount. So if you need to use multiple of them, that's also fine. You're not going to harm anyone by giving 2, 3. You can use any number of those. There are times I've used 6 of them to wake somebody up. That was really all I was going to talk about because I remember being this age and not having more than a 5-minute attention span.
So most of what I was intending on speaking about today has already been covered. So I'm going to just go to the fun stuff. All right, so we've been talking about this naloxone. At Mills-Peninsula, we have a program called the Narcan Distribution Program. And when you come by to pick it up, you can ask anyone. You walk in to the main entrance, and you can just say, I'd like some Narcan. We will hand you a box of Narcan, just like this. No questions asked. We don't write down your name. We don't take any identifying information. It has 2 packages of Narcan, which when you open them up, look like this. I've already emptied this one out. There's a plunger. The plunger goes in here. Just put a small amount of pressure, and it will activate, has a nasal spray. So we've been doing the free distribution for a reason, and the reason is most people who come to the ED who might benefit from it are not actually given prescriptions for Narcan. And even those that are given prescriptions for Narcan, about 11% of our population, only about 1% of the people who are given a prescription for Narcan will actually go fill it up. So it's much easier just to put it into their hands, and that way they have it in case they need it. So we'll give it to not only people who visit, we'll give it to our patients who we think that might benefit from it, and we'll also give it to their family members if they ask for it. So if the patient is saying, nope, I don't want the Narcan, I don't need it, I'll never use it again, we can give it to their parents who said, let us have it just in case. For the parents out there, I would absolutely have some on hand because you never know what your kid's going to get up to. You've heard the stories already. All right, so that's our Narcan distribution program. We'll literally give it to anybody who asks for it, and we'll even offer it to people who we think might benefit from it. So when you're given the Narcan, there's a couple steps you're going to try and identify who needs it, who doesn't need it. The first thing you want to do is see if the patient or the victim is responsive. And the way you'll do about that is you'll just try and do some kind of stimulus like, hey, sir, are you okay? If you don't see anything. And then you can try like a sternal rub. You can rub their chest in the middle like this. And if there is no movement, there is no kind of trying to fight you back, then they are non-responsive, right? And so we want to, the next step would be to administer our Narcan. We're going to tilt the head back, insert the Narcan into one of the nostrils, and the next step is to dial 911. Very next thing you do, dial 911, put yourself on speaker, keep yourself on speaker right there so you can talk, let them know, I have an unresponsive person, they're not breathing, I just administered Narcan. They'll give you instructions from there. You wait for your patient to recover. If they are not breathing and they need CPR, and you are not CPR trained, not everybody in this room I know is probably not CPR trained, there's something that the American Heart Association is recommending, and it's hands-only CPR. You do not need any training. All you do is you get in the middle of the chest and push 100 to 120 beats per minute. like that. You don't have to give any breaths. Just press until the heroes arrive to save the day. They'll take over for you. But if you can do that, at least until the paramedics arrive, to give the patient a fighting chance. Okay. So after you've given the Narcan, you want to put them in the recovery position. You're going to roll them over on the side like this. So that way, when they wake up, if they're going through withdrawals, they start to get nauseous and want to vomit, they're not going to choke or aspirate on the vomit. Okay, the last thing you need to watch out for is the after recovery, as Dr. Frenkel alluded to. Sometimes they do not know where they're at. They don't know who's around them. Maybe the paramedics around them, they think they're police officers, they think they're in trouble, so they may swing wildly. So just be mindful of that. After 2 minutes have gone by and they haven't reacted to the Narcan, you can give a second dose of Narcan in the nares. Like Dr. Frenkel said, you can give multiple doses. It will not harm them. But if you give them too much too early, it's going to intensify that withdrawal effect and make them a little more miserable when they come out. All right? That's all I have for you today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carmona. Our next speaker is Ms. Nancy Magee, who is the Superintendent of San Mateo County Schools for the past 6 years. Previously an English teacher, she's dedicated to equity and student-centered education. She's the founding and current leader of the Coalition for Safe Schools and Communities, which developed the Naloxone for Schools program and toolkit, which provides schools in San Mateo County with training, educational resources, and access to Narcan. Today she'll discuss fentanyl awareness and student action, creating a community of caring.
Thank you, Anya, and thanks to the Hillsborough Youth Commission and the City Council and School Board and all the community members for supporting this event. It's really important. I guess I just expressed gratitude there, but you're in a time where education is everything. Really, education is your lifeline. When you think about, when kids are learning to swim, you've got all those like life rings and buoys around the pool, right? And then sometimes you'll train to be a lifeguard. So really, education right now and how you support your friends around you is you are acting as a lifeguard. So thank you for being here and putting in this time. So we've heard all morning long that, youth are curious and teen years are a time of exploration. And, we've always said, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. They're going to hurt you, blah, blah, blah. But the difference is right now that really you don't get a runway to experiment because the risk is too high. You might not survive. The substances are so strong. And I share this. I've been an educator for 40 years, but I am also a parent. I'm a mom, and I have 2 sons. And my younger son, when he was a senior in high school, he was an amazing athlete, played on a really high-level high school basketball team. Good kid, good student, kind, funny, all the great things. And he really didn't want to go out very much when he was in high school. He was kind of a cozy guy. He liked to be cozy, so he'd stay home. We'd make cookies, have movie nights, and that kind of thing. But when he was a senior, it was like, I kind of need to grow up a little bit and get out there. This was in San Diego. That's where I lived at the time. There is a community in North County, San Diego, the Del Mar, Solana Beach, Rancho Santa Fe community, where what was happening there is that kids had lots of resources. And the OxyContin pill was new on the market, being flooded out in the communities. And kids started using OxyContin in San Diego. And so you hear about fentanyl and how deadly it is, but I also want to say that opioids are not to be messed with. All those lists of medicines, Percocet, OxyContin, heroin, all those things, they will change your body. If you think that you can have control over the drugs because you're strong-willed and you're a smart kid, you're mistaken. the drugs get into your brain and change the way that your body reacts and behaves. So my son went out and kids were taking Oxycontin and he tried it. We have addiction in our family, so he was already predisposed to that. Didn't take long, maybe a month, before he was in real trouble. He was 17 years old. For the next 10 years, my son was became a heroin addict. And so lucky, if Liz was here, I would say lucky for us that fentanyl wasn't yet really on the rise. If you go back to Mary's lines about wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3, I feel like my son was sort of in wave 2. Because if fentanyl had been widely available for him, he would not be here today with us. But because of persistence and determination and his individual strength, he did get sober, and he's been sober. He will celebrate his 7th sober birthday here in another month or 2. But during all of that time that he's been sober, he's been working in the recovery community with addicts. It is a very hard place to be. It's a very painful place to be. It's a painful place for the addict themselves, for their family, for their friends, and for the community. So what I want to say to parents is I couldn't even say the words heroin addict for like 3 or 4 years. The shame and the stigma of that was so I couldn't believe this was in my family, in my life. And, we know that this isn't about my failing as a parent. It's not about my son's failing as a kid. He was being a kid. But when those substances, when those chemicals get into your body, you sort of lose control. And what happens next isn't fun. It's not pleasant. I actually had thought about maybe I could get my son up here this weekend. He could come with me. But just know he's with you. He does work every day with young people. And he was like Liz's son. He didn't want to really hear too much either. But he certainly is part of the difference that we make today. And so as young people, what can you do about this? This is, using drugs is also about your own mental health. And we all have health. And we all try to stay fit. We eat good food and we exercise and we get good sleep and you try. But you know that when you get the flu or you have a cold, you feel pretty lousy, so you have bad health. Well, mental health is the same thing. Everybody has it. Sometimes you're in a good place and you feel good and you feel happy and you're lit up here. And sometimes you're kind of in the middle. You're tired and you're irritable. And sometimes you actually have, you're sick. Sometimes you get sick. And I hear from parents often about the level of depression, anxiety, and anxiousness and worry that kids have today for all the various reasons that they might have. What you can do as young people is look out for each other. First of all, look out for yourself. You know that when you're on a plane and they tell you about the emergency procedures, what do you do with the air mask that comes down, the oxygen mask? What do you do with it? You put it on yourself first, and then you help other people around you. So you need to make sure that you're in pretty good shape. And if you're not feeling good, hopefully as parents and families, you've learned how to talk about your feelings. Like, I'm in a bad mood, and be able to say it and let that be something you can say out loud. So that mental health piece is really important. You want to try and get involved in activities, but pay attention to your own health and to each other. The way that I discovered that my son was using, ultimately, by the time I found out what was going on, he was already using heroin. And the reason I found out was that some friends came and told me. So you can do that for each other, right? And you might be young now and you're in middle school or elementary school or high school, But you've got a long road ahead. Like as you go to college, you're going to be in lots of different kinds of situations. You'll be in party situations, and you will see people using drugs. And people will be around you, you know, and you'll have roommates, and you won't always be able to control what the kinds of decisions they're making. So if you're a caring person, you want to look out for them and try and be real and honest with them. So get yourself educated as much as you can. You're attending a full morning of drug awareness today, understanding how Narcan works. Your school has Narcan on its campuses, but do you know where it is? And do you know who's the adult on your campus that can get you to that Narcan? So that's one thing you can go back to school on Monday and ask your teachers about where do we keep our Narcan and how do we get to it. Make sure that you give your parents the information they need when events are happening at school. Let them know so they can go attend and learn. But it's also about you being willing to talk to your parents. You know, it's hard. Parents are trying to stay connected with you, and as you grow into teenagers, your whole job is to like separate from your parents, like to become independent. Like, nah, you know, I'm good, Mom. So try and remember that if you want a healthy life, that you do sometimes actually, as kids, just need to sit down at the table and talk and make yourself available to talk. So at the County Office of Education, we do have the Naloxone for Schools program. All public schools in San Mateo County are supplied with naloxone. We provide the training to that staff. And we also provide mental health support and training to staff in that space. And then we also have programs where we work with young people in schools. We do some drug education work, some tobacco use prevention work. And so we're doing things. If you're a parent and you ever feel like, you know, you need to talk to somebody as a parent, I'm here as a parent. People can call me, you can email me. If you know a parent who's struggling and like worried about their kid, I'm happy to talk with them. Not as the county superintendent, but as a mom of a kid who used heroin for 10 years. That's something, you learn a lot in those 10 years. And there's no reason to keep that wisdom to myself if it can help you, okay? Kids, if you have suggestions about things you'd like to see being done differently in your schools and there's not enough happening, let me know. And maybe we can make a change. Okay, so I thank you for your time and really for all the youth leaders for thinking to put this on today, and really honored to be part of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Superintendent Magee. Our next speaker is Supervising Inspector Christopher Smith from the Hillsborough Police Department. A corporal, he has served the town for 8 years. He's a member of the Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the U.S. Secret Service Cyber Crimes Task Force. He will speak today on the Hillsborough Police Department's response to possible opioid overdoses.
So I've been with the Hillsborough Police Department for about 8 years. I've been assigned to our Investigations Bureau for about 4 years. I worked patrol before that. I've been a field training officer. I am certified in numerous topics for the police department, including a CPR, AED, and first aid instructor. And then, I was asked to put together something in terms of how we respond and then some of the incidents that we've had regarding overdoses, because I think a lot of Hillsborough residents aren't aware that we definitely have it within our community, and the police department and Central County Fire and AMR have definitely responded to some of these incidents. Just first and foremost though, since I am with our department and our local government, I have to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. So essentially, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a doctor. I can't provide legal advice, I can't provide medical advice, I can't provide legal training or medical training. I know some of this might be obvious, but it's just something I'd like to cover. Again, I can't make any assurances or promises for anything. Every instance can be slightly different. And then also, while I am a California Post certified instructor in numerous topics for our department, with the way that California Post is set up, my instructor certificates apply only to law enforcement professionals. So I'm sure a lot of you will have a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer what I can, but frequently I might have to defer you to either an attorney, a legal expert, a doctor, a medical expert, and then always, I'm a big advocate of this too, especially for our youth in the crowd as they transition from their academic careers and then they get a little bit older in life. Continued education, continued training is very important. That's something that I've realized as I've gotten older and older and progressed through my career with the department. A little bit of information to start off with. Hillsborough, town of Hillsborough, incorporated May 5th, 1910, 100% residential community, very unique community. It is quite large for our population, though. I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of that. We have about 6.25 square miles, 6.23 to be exact, with a population of just under 11,000. Emergency services, obviously we have our own Hillsborough Police Department. We contract with Central County Fire Department, and some of those members are here today. Excellent fire department, and then we contract with AMR for additional medical services in terms of ambulance. Just a little bit of facts about the Hillsborough Police Department. We're currently comprised of 34 members. 24 of those members are sworn, 10 are non-sworn. So sworn members are anyone that is, California 830 PC, so our chief on down in terms of officers, that's how many members that we have. 10 non-sworn are going to be like our dispatchers, support staff, records. Any given shift, we're broken into 4 shifts. We have a night shift and a day shift. They kind of split the week. You're typically going to have anywhere between 3 and 5 officers. That's including a supervisor that's assigned to each shift. We work 12 hours from 7 to 7, your pick of the day. 5-year averages from 2019 to 2023, we've averaged 30,645 incidents. Approximately 9,645 calls of those were calls for service. And then we have a very, very low emergency response time. It's under 3 minutes. So our average response time is 2 minutes and 41 seconds, which we're very proud of. These are just some statistics that our department released. They were posted on our Facebook page, all of our social media, and I believe the town's website as well. Just had some of our incidents, terms control statistics, crime statistics. We don't take every crime, high-tech crimes, identity theft, things like that. We don't necessarily always post. We just kind of give a broad overview of that. Then on to our possible and confirmed overdose incidents. So we had a large spike in 2019. Don't want to conjecture about that, but that was right around the time that the DEA started to put a lot of information in federal agencies about fentanyl coming onto the market. But we did have a large spike in 2019. We responded to 10 possible confirmed overdoses since April of 2019. Those 10 incidents, unfortunately 7 did result in death. So overdose incidents are a very, very serious life-threatening emergency. So our record system, we're changing that right now, but we don't necessarily have a function within our records where I can go into our records management system and generate reports. So I had to go through our incidents, all of our case numbers for this 5-year average from April 2019 until the present. Actual numbers may be a little bit higher. I put that in because not all incidents were necessarily reported to us. There's some medical calls that we know that happen sometimes, and we're not getting notified, whether that be someone self-transports or they have a family member or a friend that transports for them. Well, there's some medical incidents too. If it gets dispatched to fire, we're generally getting notified, but I can't guarantee that. So those are the numbers that we have. We have had a couple confirmed fentanyl deaths. So of the 7 possible and confirmed overdose deaths since April of 2019, 2 of them, there was 1 in 2019 and 1 in 2020 that were deemed by the San Mateo County Coroner's Office to be the result of acute fentanyl intoxication or toxicity. I think a lot of people in our community might not be aware of that, but we do have fentanyl that's in the community, and we have responded to calls for service that involve fentanyl. So what to do? I get this question quite a bit. I know the Hillsborough Youth Commission had a lot of questions for me in terms of calling 911 and some of the California health and safety codes regarding Good Samaritan laws. Unfortunately, I can't provide interpretation for the law, but I would just, recommend that you read it, talk to an attorney, talk to an expert about it. I can say that our department, we value all life. That's our primary goal here. Is with a possible overdose incident, we encourage that anyone encountering an emergency, life-threatening emergency or an overdose, call 911. That's very, very important, and that's going to be my biggest recommendation in this event. And that's our primary response during possible overdoses and other life-threatening emergencies is the preservation of life. We'll get into that a little bit further in terms of the additional training that we go through, particularly because we have a unique geography in town. It's a unique community, and a lot of our medical calls or life-threatening emergencies, you might receive. And a lot of them, you might be seeing Hillsborough Police Department officers before you see fire personnel. So we carry a little bit of extra equipment, and we receive a little bit extra training than some other local agencies because of that. So I think a lot of people too might not be aware of what happens when you call 911. That's another one of the questions that I received, and I've received from a lot of residents of Hillsborough. So when you call 911, it's directed to the nearest emergency dispatch center based upon your location, if you're using a cell phone, or the information regarding your location that you provided your telecommunications company. With Hillsborough, it generally means the police department, but not always. If you're up in the west side of town and you're near one of the cell repeaters, we don't have a whole lot of them in town, that's part of it, but if you're near one of the repeaters near 280, you might get transferred when you call 911 to CHP first. So we have sometimes incidents where people that are calling in on 280, they get transferred to our Hillsborough Police Department, and then we're transferring them to CHP, or residents are calling for help and it might go to CHP or somewhere else, and then they're getting transferred to our police department. So that's just something to be mindful of. I know when it's an emergency, it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be a lot scary, but when you call, you might not immediately get us. So don't hang up, remain on the phone, and let the dispatch center transfer you to the right location. And this is true in a lot of other cities as well. You might not immediately get the emergency services that you're expecting, and you might need to get transferred. Be prepared to answer questions regarding the incident. Provide as much information as you can. It's going to be kind of short, who, what, when, where, why, and maybe how from our trained dispatchers. But they're going to be asking you questions, and it's important to answer them because they're going to be providing crucial information to responding emergency services. Police and fire in our area have separate call centers. So if you get transferred to us, you're going to get transferred to fire's dispatch center afterwards. There's going to be some of the, not always, but most of the time. There's going to be some additional questions that they might have for you in terms of fire, and then they're going to be dispatching fire and police officers from there. Again, big thing, don't hang up, remain on the line. A lot of times with a life-threatening emergency, the dispatch center is going to ask that you stay on the line to keep on providing additional information to our responding units. What to expect with our emergency response. So again, once the dispatchers have the initial information, they're going to be dispatching us to a call for service. A lot of times that's getting transferred to fire as well, and they're going to be responding. Our officers during a life-threatening emergency will initiate an emergency response. For us, that we call it code 3, but that's activating our lights and sirens, right? Be prepared, especially this can be with some of our larger properties. Be prepared to meet us or have someone meet us at the front door of the entrance to the property, particularly if it's a gated residence or has, doesn't necessarily have a gate that you can open or a driveway entrance. We do, fire carries, they're called Knox box keys, and most of our residents have a little box on there that they allow access to fire. But not all of our officers have that, and that's something we don't always carry, so it's just geography. It's not uncommon for our officers to arrive first for medical emergencies. I'll be giving us some summary of one of our recent ones that happened in February, and officers were on scene, I think, about 2 minutes or so before fire personnel were, which resulted in them deploying Narcan. All of our officers are issued Narcan, Noxalone. It's 4 milligrams nasal spray. It's common for our officers to carry 2. So you typically, if you have 2 officers that are responding, 4 doses of Narcan. At the very minimum, you're going to have 2 doses that they're carrying. They're also trained on first aid, CPR, and AEDs. We'll go through that equipment, but every one of our patrol cars has an AED in it now. It's a wall of text. Give a brief summary of it. So on February 11th, about 4:30 a.m., our dispatch center received an emergency call for medical service. One of the residents reported that one of their friend's sons was potentially suffering from an overdose incident. We received additional information that they had gone out and they may have taken some drugs, and there were some things in the drugs that they didn't expect. I know many of the other speakers have talked about that today, but it's always something to be mindful of. So our officers initiated emergency response. They arrived at the residence within a few minutes. They met the homeowner at the front door. The homeowner brought them inside the house and brought them into one of the bathrooms. There was a adult subject that was non-responsive on the floor of the bathroom. So our officers evaluated the subject, checked their pulse, their breathing, recognized that they had really weak breathing, and that they had the objective signs of a potential acute opioid overdose. Recognizing that, our officers used their issued Narcan and intranasally administered 4 milligrams of naloxone or Narcan to the person's nose. Almost immediately afterwards, they recognized that the person's breathing began to normalize. So where they had really short and shallow breathing before, almost to the point of stopping, they started to take deeper and deeper breaths. From there, a couple minutes later, Central County Fire Department arrived, provided additional emergency medical services, and then ultimately, because it was deemed a likely overdose incident, the person was transported by AMR to a nearby hospital. So far in 2024, we've had 2 potential overdose incidents. So, issued medical equipment. I wanted to bring in some of the equipment that we have, just to give you an idea. A lot of it's the same equipment that fire carries as well. A couple years ago, we changed some of the equipment and added a lot more because we found that a lot of the medical calls that we were responding to, we might be first on scene, and we changed things a little bit. Previously, we had been mostly concerned with preservation of life, and we still are. We just added Narcan onto that, AEDs as well. Our goal isn't to provide, it's to provide emergency treatment only, right? So we want to keep a person alive long enough for fire to bring the necessary equipment to stabilize them in AMR and then get them transported to the hospitals as quickly as possible. So what you'll see is a lot of the equipment that we have is for managing like massive hemorrhaging, oxygen. We carry BVMs or bag valve masks, tourniquets, gauze, some bandages, and then recently, a couple years ago, we added AEDs to every vehicle to assist us in CPR. We changed a few years ago and started carrying BVMs to provide oxygen during CPR to give the person a little bit, just a little bit more oxygen, since we switched away and started doing no breath CPR. That's pretty common, I think, throughout the county and throughout the nation these days. Fortunately, we have some of our fire personnel, and they can help answer some of the questions that I might not be entirely trained on. So, tag valve masks, one thing that we carry. Always carry trauma shears, very important, especially if you're going to be applying a tourniquet or any dressing. Basic first aid kit. So it's just going to have some bandages, gloves, which are always important. We carry additional gloves on us, but it's always important to have some extra ones. Cold pack, basic stuff there. We're dealing with kids sometimes. We always carry a small stuffed animal that can help. Carry space blankets if someone's going into shock. These can be helpful to keep them warm or if they've been exposed to cold. Additional tape, additional compression bandage or gauze, and a lot more gauze here. I've been on our county's regional SWAT team for 5 years. We receive a lot more additional training. We've been applying a lot of that training and knowledge to our officers. For SWAT, I carry one of these on patrol. Some of our officers do, but not all of them as well. We carry something called an IFAC. It's a personal first aid kit. And that just has additional stuff. So you see here that I have naloxone or Narcan. It's an intranasal spray, 4 milligrams. Carry additional shears. I carry something called a SWAT bandage. This is a really good compression bandage that we started issuing probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Not so great as a tourniquet, but it can be a really great compression bandage. And one of the biggest things that we carry, and I always highly recommend, is tourniquets, cat tourniquets. The other thing that I would be mindful of too is if you're purchasing anything from for a home kit or to give to your kids or et cetera, family members, be mindful of where you purchase it. Do not purchase anything, or I would say go through a reputable source. There have been, particularly off of Amazon, a lot of counterfeit tourniquets that will not work and a lot of counterfeit medical equipment. So if you go through a reputable source, you're going to pay a little bit more, but you're going to be assured that it's good equipment when you need it, when it's a life-threatening emergency. I think that's about it. The AEDs are a really great tool. I know pretty much every school has them. I know training's offered. Unfortunately, I can't provide the training on it, but I would highly recommend going to a CPR and AED course and getting certified and maintaining that certification. Anything you guys could think of?
Doing great.
All right. Any further questions or comments and concerns? We are a 24-hour agency. You can always find us at 1600 Floribund Avenue. Our officers are always willing to speak to anyone that comes to us. We have a 24-hour dispatch line, 650-375-7470. It's an important one to know. 911 for emergencies, and for any emails, police@hillsborough.net is the quickest way to get a response. Thank you very much.